Hello and welcome to this ASEDS webcast. This ASEDS webcast is handling complex data formats, e-discovery, and IG for schematics, multilingual, multimedia, and cloud. I'm your host, Daniela Guzman of aseds.org. In a moment, we'll be joined by two great presenters, but first I have a couple of quick announcements. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a members-only association that provides training, resources, and networking to the e-discovery community. We also offer the Certified E-Discovery Specialist credential, which is held by hundreds of professionals across the Americas, Europe, and Asia. You can join today and start receiving a number of benefits exclusive to our members, including news content, on-demand web seminars, our This Invites newsletter, and discounts on certification and live training events. Before we get started with the webinar, I also want to announce our 6th annual eDiscovery Conference and Exhibition. We're looking forward to another great show, and we already have some great speakers lined up, as you can see. This conference is going to be September 29th and 30th in National Harbor, Maryland, at the Gaylord National Resort. This conference, apart from being a great way to network, it's going to gather top practitioners, judges, lawyers, and others to help solve common problems facing those who seek to lower the cost and risk associated with electronic information and to leverage its legal and business value. The conference gives attendees an opportunity to meet face-to-face with leading experts, decision makers, and service providers, and it also boasts several networking events which allow attendees to make new contacts and reconnect with peers. I know you guys have a lot of choices when it comes to conferences, so we've designed every detail to make sure that ours stands out from the pack and is worth your time and money. If you're interested in attending the conference or knowing more, you can visit our website, ediscoveryconference.com, for more information. Now, before further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Today we are very lucky to have two very expert panelists here. First, we have Jan Schultz. He is the Chief Strategy Officer of ZyLAB. He is the company's president and CEO from 1989 to 2009 and shaped ZyLAB as an information management powerhouse in countries across the globe. His leadership and vision led to ZyLAB being selected for historic and high-profile engagements, including the United Nations War Crime Tribunals, the FBI Enron investigations, and the United States White House Executive Office's president. He holds a Master of Science degree in Computer Science from Delft University of Technology and a PhD in Computational Linguistics from the University of Amsterdam. As of 2008, he holds the Extraordinary Chair in Text Mining from the Department of Knowledge Engineering at the University of Maastricht. In January 2010, Schultz joined the board of directors of the Association of Information and Image Management, the worldwide leading authority for standards in education and enterprise information management. So thank you so much for being here, Jan. And we also have Mary Mack, who is the Enterprise Technology Council for ZyLAB, a global e-discovery and intelligent information governance software company focused on helping organizations in-source e-discovery to reduce legal spend and prevent privacy breaches and IP leakage. Prior to e-discovery, Mary designed, coded, tested, and maintained mission-critical enterprise systems for banks, health insurers, and pharmaceutical companies. Certified in forensics and computer telephony, Mary is admitted to the Illinois Bar and a graduate of Northwestern University School of Law. Mary is the author of The Process of Illumination, The Practical Guide to E-Discovery, and the co-editor of Thomson Reuters West E-Discovery for Corporate Counsel. Thank you for being here, Mary.
Well, thank you for having us. We're delighted to be here and delighted to, we'll be at the conference, and I understand from my email, Craig Ball will be as well, so we'll be looking forward to seeing all of you there. I want to say that I'm broadcasting live from the sunny, warm state of Minnesota today, and Jan is, I understand, in the sunny country of the Netherlands. I'm not sure what city you're in, Jan.
Yeah.
So our agenda, we can hear you, Jan. Good, good, good. So our agenda today, first we're going to discuss a little bit about, what are we talking about when we talk about difficult file types? And then how are people generally handling it? Some current case law around file types, and some cases that have come down recently that are very instructive on how to get files that you had to do some extra processing around, or maybe conversion or something like that. How do you get them admitted around the hearsay rule and authenticated? And we're going to show some technical workflows and then give some examples of trying to do things manually or with proprietary software versus doing things systematically and in an automated manner. And as always, we invite your questions, and as best I can, I'll fit them into a topic we'll handle at the end, but we really would enjoy your questions. And there's a little bit, not the chat. File type. Experience of people that I've talked with, that the difficult file types, there are not a lot of them, so the 80-20 rule, but it takes a lot of time to deal with them. The rest of them generally fly through the system, your normal Word docs and your Office docs, your emails and things of that nature. But when you're into a case where those kind of file types are important, it can take a lot of time. You have to hire external people. You may need to get software to display it or to listen to it, and it's generally not until the end of your exception handling and figuring out, is it really important, is it not really important, and that you need to be on the starting block and go really fast, and then you want to quality control it, and so there's a lot of reactive adrenaline that goes on with these types of files, unless it's a planned. I'm sure you've encountered various file types as well. Your non-Microsoft, and most of us in the service and software area can handle these things now. They Lotus emails or the mBoxes or even the GroupWise. Believe it or not, there are still organizations using GroupWise, or they did use GroupWise when their lawsuit or other. That's always been a little bit problematic. And then most of us have something to do to handle those non-text PDFs, which always cracks me up, because PDFs are the contracts. PDFs are the industry and the community practices back a few years ago to ignore those PDFs. The more diligent were actually reviewing page by page the graphic. Same thing with embedded files. We've come to terms with it, most of us, where in the past they were pretty much ignored, and the placeholder that might display on an image that would indicate that there was an embedded file would cause problems when you produce those types of things. Oh, what was that? We want that too, and embed them. And then, of course, proprietary databases. That is a discipline in and of itself. I'll be talking of how how people are handling that. Your regular databases just sit with the plain old access databases. And then in the set or in the documents themselves, the very short or the very long documents. And some of the other things I've got listed here, your forensic files or other compressed files, Excel worksheets, or other number kinds of documents. So what kind of cases are we talking about when we're talking about these kind of file types? Can't we just ignore them? Why are they important? And there was a case recently in the last couple of years, construction case, that totally ignored the AutoCAD because it was just too difficult to handle. But that was the core of the case. It did get negotiated away, but huge drawings, the A0, they call them the A0 drawings. So things that don't fit normally on an 8.5 file. The text that goes sideways, like graphs might have something sideways, or a map. Things that are color or white on black X-rays, those types of things. So those are the graphic types of things that I is somewhat problematic. One of the cases in Florida, I believe it was, major law firm got sanctioned pretty terribly because they didn't print a big color. They printed in sort of that difference between color and black and white was deemed important. Things that we wouldn't have normally thought about. So in products liability and divorce, where I'm talking about audio files here, you can have insider trading, internal investigations. You have multiple encoding formats for the sound files. And the sound files are generally stored either within the email, like in a unified messaging system, or on a server, like a voice over IP server, or it could be in a call recording system. Being able to get those files out, those audio files out, that's one thing, but then the metadata around the audio, even the date and time of the call, that's all in a separate file, much like a load file, only from an audio system. So to have an e-discovery process that's able to handle that, or at least to know about it, because it's wonderful. In cases, your Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, health-related organization in multiple language. And so there you have, number one, do you know about it? Or are you just processing everything as English and hoping for the best? And then there are different fonts. Some read left to right, some read right to left, some read up and down. There's idioms and grammar. And then in damages and contract cases, now you're looking for database information. You're looking for what were the sales of the company, what were their marketing customer overlap, and how much of a market presence do you have. And so these databases can be very important, and generally you need to have somebody within how those databases are constructed, or you need quite the expert, either by inspection or by extraction, and how that can work to your advantage. So before we get into, oh my gosh, how do you handle this in a technical manner, let's talk a little bit about the procedural, the civil procedural aspects of it. Because the data source itself, just because a company has a bunch of AutoCAD or a bunch of audio files, it may not contain relevant or responsive material. And so that's a cool thing to do. Completely obvious on its face. All of these things, you can sample them and rule them out and document with a nice sampling exercise. And the other thing, in the 26F, you're always able to, in a scope negotiation, it's not only the substance, it's also the cost of review and production. And so it may be possible to negotiate these things away. And in order to negotiate them away, though, you need to know you have them, and it would be good to know how much and whose, so that you can make these kind of requests of your adversary to set them aside. You know, as with mutually assured destruction, if you're in a business-to-business litigation and you both got these kind of files, that's where it's easier to push them aside, much like they did in the construction case, even though probably one party's a little sorry they did that. You can also, if it, you know, it's not agreed by the other party, you can talk about some of these files as not reasonably accessible, because generally when you have to use special programs to transform files, they might fall into the category of not reasonably accessible. Or if the effort is so great and the stakes in the case are so low, you can make a proportionality argument there. And then if you do need to, well, let's get to it. Let's collect it and unpack it and do whatever we need to do to it and produce it in the most efficient and cost-effective manner. So don't we just need to deal with email and Office docs and PDFs and things like that? What, you know, what are the judges saying about difficult file types? So I went through and looked at a bunch of recent cases, like how evidence. Either the other side does not object, or one side asks the other side for a request to admit, or one of the practices is like the business records exceptions to the hearsay rule to be able to get files in. And then in terms of authentication, you got your general chain of custody. Where did the file come from, and you know, what happened to it on its way before it got introduced? Is it a true and correct copy? If you recall some of the arguments about whether TIFFs were true and correct copies of native files. So there's some e-discovery art and practice to use in these difficult file formats, because unless you can handle them in line with a normal process that's logged and documented, it's not really like a business record, because somebody is by hand doing some things that need to be documented sort of outside of a system. So let's talk about these cases here. The GPS case, the map case from the Ninth Circuit was it's a summer case, June of 2015, and there they made some really interesting distinctions about the GPS and the satellite images. And they referred to the satellite images more like a mute photo, so this is, and it wasn't making an assertion. But somebody had tagged a location on the satellite image, and they were wondering, could they get that in under the hearsay rule? So they just, in this instance, they just sort of like clicked and the location was recorded by the machine or by Google, and that was deemed by the court to be fine and not hearsay because it wasn't a statement by a person. And however, they said if the location was manually entered and labeled, that would be a statement by a person. So this case is a really good one when you run into these, particularly web or cloud cases that have location data, to sort out how you might admit that, get that admitted. Then the next case that I've got here is a proprietary license. It was around like audio and video, and the assertion on one side was, well, if we give you the video, we have to give you the software to view the video. Our software license doesn't allow us to do that. It's beyond the bounds of the license. Therefore, we're not going to do it. And then the court said, and they relied on comments in the federal rules from 2006 that there might need to be a reasonable amount of technical support or information on application software or other reasonable assistance, and they relied on Rule 34 that reasonable costs of production are deemed to be paid by the producing party. So what the court said is give them the license just for the duration of the case, the limit, like a limited license, and or pay for an additional license so that they can view the material. I thought that was also pretty interesting. That was Eastern District of Tennessee. Then this Russian Facebook case is also a quite interesting case. It's the U.S. versus Vayner 2014 case from Second Circuit. It was authenticating a printout from the equivalent of our American Facebook, but it was the Russian Facebook. But it was deemed that there was insufficient evidence that the page was what the government claimed it to be. And part of the examination of the agent that was attempting to, was testifying to get this admitted, was that he didn't really know about the program. He hadn't used it a lot. He only used it to view the page in question, and then he didn't know, and this I think is key, if identity verification was required. So who made the page? It wasn't really clear to the court that they had established that that the person that they said made this particular page that really impacted how the case turned out really did collect it. And they likened it to flyers on the street. If you just found a flyer on the street that said somebody made that particular flyer, you wouldn't necessarily assume that was true. You want other evidence to corroborate that. And some of that can be obviously for testimony, but some of that can also be machine-generated information. So that case, I think, when we're talking about authentication of these types of files is quite important. And then in terms of translation, when do things need to be translated? And when you translate them, how do you get the translation admitted into court? And do you need a certified translation or an affidavit with your translation? Ken Rashbaum and his co-authors have written a great article on that, and so I've included the link so that you have all of the citations in it, because obviously it's a jurisdiction by jurisdiction type of thing. But how do you deal with foreign documents? We're going to talk about the technical part of that a little bit later, but this is the legal part of it. Now, in audio, Novik, oh my gosh, Novik. This was Southern District of New York in 2014, they actually got an adverse inference over 10 weeks of audio. They got fees and had to have their depositions redone. And that's because they didn't preserve the audio, and there was enough of a showing that it was important, and it was prejudicial, and so they did get their adverse inference. So we've got case law on some of these difficult file types, so it deems that that we need to up our game and pay attention to them. And then databases, I started looking for representative cases, and at the wonderful resource that K&L Gates maintains, ediscoverylaw.com, they had over 150 cases dealing with ESI that were databases. And so that tells you that those are a very popular source of electronic data. So here's the checklist. Now I just went through a whole bunch of considerations. But consider, is it well, the first one, my first box is missing. It should be, is it responsive or relevant? So when we send the slides out, I'll put that on the checklist. And then, is it proportional? Is it reasonably accessible? Is it a legacy database? Do you have any alternatives? Can you get to the same information by deposing somebody or asking them to admit certain facts? In the chain, do you have a chain of, if you have to do it, do you have a chain of custody planned? If you've got a novel file type that needs outside handling, outside of your normal system, do you have a process for handling that kind of thing? Most of you probably do. Can you do it yourself, or do you have to send it to a service bureau to have it done? And that, of course, that implicates time considerations for the sending and the receiving, let alone the documentation around it. When you're reviewing it, can you review it with the rest of your files, or do you need a separate platform or separate software to do the review? And then when you're producing, how are you going to label it with a Bates number? If you need confidentiality branding, if you need to redact it, how is that going to happen? And then, I don't want to put them last, but the admissibility and the authentication that we talked about earlier. We all know that most of the files that are handled in e-discovery don't find their way to court, but you don't know which ones are going to and which ones aren't. So planning for its admissibility, and then also its authentication. So that's your checklist. And when you're dealing with audio, and we talked a little bit about unified messaging and call recording, but there's also webcasts like this one. Many of the video and audio cases that you'll find in e-discovery are around law enforcement, because they've got dispatches, and now I think we'll see some more moving forward on body cams and those types of cases. But you can reduce it via metadata if you get the metadata in the right format. Your date and time is always good. Many of these have a location if it's video, so you can isolate that way. And in phone calls, it's sometimes good to time of day and also length of call. Those are nice, crisp, easily explained ways to reduce data. And then it can be indexed. And some of the indexing is more of a speech to text, and then there are others that are speaker independent phone means. Speaker independent means much like when you are training drag and dictate that you need to train. Well, speaker independent means you do not need to train, and because how can you train if you have audio with people that aren't there anymore? And then being able to do your search and produce and Bates, and then only if you need to admit, formally transcribe the documents for admission or produce the native file. Your foreign languages, your data sources, supply chains, headquarters, subsidiaries of multinationals, or your constituents who speak a different language, or your clients. And then the process is to determine either there's other languages or have the software detect the languages and be able to folder it so that if you need to get contract attorneys that speak the language, you're able to isolate that part of the review. And many of our clients consider, the presence of multiple languages to indicate that there's an international component that may also impact privacy and the handling of data around with the different privacy rules depending on the geography or the type of data, the health data. So of course you're going to do your data reduction, and then there's machine translation, and Jan's going to show you a little bit of what that looks like, and then producing the file in the original language. And there's currently, do you produce a translation with an affidavit, or do you allow the other side to produce that? When you're admitting, most will do that translation so you're sure of what it says, and then you're able to validate it with an affidavit or a certification. Your schematics and graphics, being able to index those, you're not going to want to do generally all of your schematics and graphics, because we all have those lovely logos on our emails. You don't want to be trying to scrape all those, but so there are ways to reduce the number of them that you would try to OCR, and you can do that by file type or by custodian. All of your normal data reduction techniques. Some of these, if they just go through the system and get produced as native files, possibly should have been redacted because there may be some personally identifiable information, especially in the health area. So you want that redacted, and also your trade secrets in patent cases. And being able to do that on sideways or upside down text, that would be good. Otherwise, you're doing it by hand. And your databases, so determining whether or not you want to extract or whether you can generate a report that can then be put into your general review set. Generating the report as a PDF or an Excel file. So limiting the inspection. One of the new rules is highlighting that's going to be effective in highlights the idea of inspection. It's always been in the rules, but it's a little more prominent now. And inspection can turn into a fishing expedition, so it's important to limit how that happens. But if you can reduce, that's pretty much a practice. And redacting of personally identifiable information, for example, just showing the last 4 of a social instead of the entire social. And producing it in a common format like Excel. Your forensic formats, this is one where legal, in a procedural manner, you have a lower expectation that is an accessible format, because you have to do something to transform it into something that is readable by the e-discovery software. Sometimes you need some expertise to do that. But you can also process it in line if you're able to open those things up. And there's also the do you produce the whole forensic file, or can you just produce parts of it? And is your software doing authenticity? Because if you're using for people who are forensically trained, they know how to do this documentation, and so they'll give it to you with the file. Now, if a collection happens and they're just so happen to be in the collection some forensic files. So here's a for the main sources of difficult data sources, your audio form languages, schematics, and graphics by stage, whether you're collecting, reviewing, and producing. And this is basically what we talked about before, but I thought you might like to have it in a in a more concise format. So, Jan, you are an expert at reducing expenses with e-discovery generally. I mean, back in the day, just being able to index things was a pretty big deal. And as you've been working with like the UN, with their different line of requirements around audio and mapping and things like that, how can non-budget busting ways to handle these file types?
Okay, yeah, and thank you very much, Mary. That's, by the way, that was a very useful overview. That schedule, that flowchart, very easy to use. And,
oh my gosh!
Yeah, I like it.
And it's legal. And it's legal, Jan. Oh my goodness.
No, and if you talk about the UN, you have to also add their ever complex file format, and also with the limited technical skills that they often they have to deal with evidence collection in remote areas where a lot of these war crimes took place. And what we see is that with technology, we can really create great savings in this more. But what we've been doing over the years is that because of our experience with all these possible handling of these complex file formats, so you can do most of it in-house and time and documentation you need to create. If you take me to the next slide, I have a couple of examples. And what you see here is audio search. The way how we have implemented the discovery platform with ZyLAB is that it just doesn't matter whether you search text or audio. You have exactly the same interface. You have exactly the same text that you can use for responsive, privileged, not responsive, relevant, etc. And if you search, you can indicate whether you search on text or you search on audio. And this is a much nicer solution than what a lot of our colleagues in the market are presenting, where they have this. We can search the audio where when we key in a word, that word is transcribed into a set of phonemes that are expected to be pronounced when people say these words. And then we use a very advanced statistical algorithm, which then searches directly through all the audio recordings, and we can search hundreds of hours of record by applying multiple cores. We can process larger sets also in parallel. There's no need to transcribe your recordings before you need to searching. We need to ingest it. We do a little bit of pre-processing, but it's really not as CPU intensive as transcription is, automatic transcription. And then if something is responsive, you tag it. And if it's responsive, then typically in production, it will have to be transcribed by a human, being with 100% accuracy for submissibility. Okay, take me to the next slide, please. Yeah, what we see here is when you are actually using this type of technology compared to a manual approach. In a manual approach, you have to listen to the audio. Now, there's probably a lot of people that love to listen to audio recordings for $200 an hour in order to determine whether something is relevant or not. But next to the fact that you will probably have a lower quality of retrieval, it's also very expensive and very boring work. So the searchable audio review, which is the right side, being just 40% if you own hours, and with 10,000 hours, it's even smaller. When you have these type of audio formats. Now, as you explained already, there's a lot of places where we see these audio recordings, not only audio recordings from, for instance, most phone Linux computers that are part of your network. And when somebody leaves a voicemail for somebody, that voicemail can be emailed, or the voicemail is stored just in a directory as a file somewhere in your file system. So we see a lot more audio being present these days. And as judges will find out that it's actually reasonable, affordable to also search this type of data, you will probably see in the future that more and more audio recordings are becoming part of an e-discovery request. Can you take the next slide, please? Okay, here's another tough file format, photos and images. One of the technologies we have at ZyLAB is visual classification, where we can classify images in a variety of different categories from, for instance, or you may not know, so a lot of people will share taking a screenshot and then zipping it and then emailing it. Now, if this is a picture, you cannot, without any text behind it, you cannot search it, and you will not find it by using text-based search techniques. Now, we have techniques where we can actually use kind of a visual interpretation of the image, so we can recognize whether it's a document with some handwriting on it, it's a spreadsheet, something indoor, or outdoor, or party. Now here again, you can take a manual approach and browse through all the photos and images approach, and you can make even larger percentual savings than with you like that. $1 million, please. Okay, this is one of our most exciting features. This is search in one language and find results in the other. What we've done is we've fully embedded a machine translation software, and depending on some processing features that you can set when data is ingested and processed, we recognize languages. Certain languages we can immediately in the background translate into English. And then we store both documents. We store them as a document family with the original document in the original language, and then attach to it is a presentation of it.
I'm sorry, Jan, I just missed that. Jan? Yeah, I think we just finished. Oh, are you there, Jan? So as Jan was saying, turns into the search box in either English or another language, and the document with its translation held and attached to it more or less as a family. So that's English speaking reviewers to do that first level review, and only elevate to a second level review for native speakers.
I could hear you perfectly. Okay. Yeah, so this is a great feature. It works with a variety of different translation engines, both on the internet and also licenses that can be installed on-premise if you have highly confidential data you wish to transfer that we can offer. Okay, next slide, please, Mary. And here's some example. This is like really the biggest money saver we have. If you are manually going to translate documents, 100,000 documents, compared to using our machine translation, it will save you about 80%. And if you have 500,000 pages, it's even worse, or even better, looking from which perspective you're looking at it. Machine translation is very fast. We can translate 5,000 pages per hour on one core. If you have multiple cores, you can parallelize it or horizontally scale it. And it's a huge money saver. And you can save a lot of money not only on the translation cost, but also on the review cost, because you don't need reviewers managing certain languages. Or you don't need to do like an interview, which will probably come with additional management cost. The advantage is enormous, and then at the end of the day, whatever you take as responsive is the amount of data that you do need to translate. If you're going to submit it again here, machine translation is not yet submissible. However, having said that, we see that close to what human beings achieve in translation. And then this type of software is also trainable. You can train it by adding more examples. If you have a lot of samples, we increase also the quality of your translation. Okay, next one, please, Mary. There we go. What we can also do in our platform is automatically identify potentially identifiable information, or potentially personal identifiable information, or potential protected health, and based on different types of text mining and content analytics and search technology. You can do that in a variety of languages, but also addresses, individual names, license numbers, bank account numbers, etc. And then we can automatically redact them, and in which case you can save tremendously on the cost of redaction. Typically, I think, Mary, a redaction will cost us like $1 each. That's still the metric that's being used out there, I believe.
Yeah, certainly if people are drawing boxes.
Yeah, especially then. So what we do with our software is that we already draw the boxes for you, and all you have to do is review them. And then we have invented this great technology which we call transparent redactions, which allow you to the records manager or as a paralegal approve or disapprove a redaction. And then of course we also automatically include extension codes and other necessarily requirements that you need to add. There we go, and this is another really hot one, especially when you're dealing with construction litigation or litigation related related to field maintenance of buildings, infrastructural works, airplanes. There's a lot of litigation in this field, even patent law, where typically consequences in 4 different directions. And thereby we can make even sideways text fully searchable. And we've seen many cases in patent litigation, but also in law enforcement and regulatory requirements, where this has been a very useful feature, allowing our clients to find even stuff that they do. And here's another one showing the difference, and highlighted here in yellow in the different drawings. And if these drawings are PDFs or images, and they're on the fly, recognize there are no text behind it, well, OCR, what you see here on the left is also very interesting. You see the whole conversation. There's like 19 different emails. Or there's a doc file, there's an Excel file, there's some text in the email. Immediately you can see what's all there. You can see the meta information on the left side, different properties, where it's file properties or document properties or other information that we add automatically by using our text mining and content analytics and our technology-assisted review tools. And on the right side, you can just sign different tags, either for the document or for the whole branch or for the whole family. Okay, yeah, I think that's it, right? There we go. And
yeah, you came up with your.
Yeah. Now, if you add it all up, then on an average document set, on metrics that we receive from our real-world document sets, and in these real-world document sets, there was foreign languages that needed to be translated. There's drawings, and by using our processing on all of these processing capabilities and advanced technology and all these abilities, we see that in general we are able to reach 50% using other tools, not have this technical capability. So the left one using technology, and then if you don't have the right technology, of course, you need to manually translate, you need to manually do the audio, you need to manually do the other file formats that are not supported by a lot of 50%. But again, I've seen cases where people were able to review like a lot of more data in like half of the time with half of the resources, and they found much more relevant and responsive data than with any other technology that was out there. Okay.
And so now it's time for questions. So we have a question on how to, like, if you don't do things inline and have reports, how do you document special files the same way as you would as it's coming into your facility, or if you're in a corporation or the government, wherever that file originated, you have that ID for the file. We'll use audio as an example. Some systems will automatically detect it, or reviewers tag it as export that's done, and so then you document who did the export when it was done, and the media gets put down on CD or the DVD or hard drive, USB, whatever it is you're using, or FTP site, and then you send it to the service provider. They then will have their own chain of custody documentation that they received it. So you've got that you've sent, they've got that they've received. They go through terms to do that, to document that, and then they give you a result set that may be tagged, may be reduced, but when they give you the result set, they'll give you some documentation along with that result set about the unique file IDs that you have. Then you take that system with and insert that back into your database, with the codes that they may have attached to it. And so this is a methodology if you don't have something to do your non-text PDFs or your graphic files.
Sounds like a lot of work, Mary, right?
It's a little bit. Well, it's the and then you quality control it, of course.
Yeah, because what happens if you do something wrong?
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So all of that documentation, some people have built databases to be able to, when they send things out, and some are using sheets, some are using single use types of documentation, so that to make it not just go on your log. So there are considerations in all of this to make sure that you don't in the same way as you don't commingle client data in your database, that you don't commingle multiple clients, multiple case data in your documentation. And some organizations even go so far as not to commingle custodian documentation, so that if you're able to do data reduction via custodian, that you don't inadvertently want to look at with the fisheye in the same production set, not something special. That's generally what our client. You mentioned 60 of languages. Is it just the European languages, or?
No, it's also Chinese and Japanese, and a lot of all of the European languages, almost all of them, and both Western and Eastern European languages. Also used a lot in.
Well, very good. Well, we're coming to.
And with Bing, so basically. And basically, our users can also use whatever language pair is available from those two providers. But then the problem is that a copy of your translation will remain on Bing's and Google's file servers, which could be a problem in the future, especially if you're dealing with confidential data. But with the on-premise licenses, we have most languages are supported.
Yeah, I recommend those for proof of concepts, but not for highly confidential data that's in the heat of a case.
The quality is not always guaranteed.
Exactly. So we're at the top of the hour. I want to be respectful about everybody's time, and I want to thank you, Jan, for joining me on this difficult file format webcast. I invite any of you who want more information. My email is mary.mac@zylab.com, or you can email Jan. And I'd be happy to talk to any of you at the ACEDS conference. I'll be pleased to be attending, and I'll be on one of the panels, although I'm not quite sure which one. We're still talking about that. But the conference, from my perspective, is a fantastic. Those of you in the ACEDS community that attend an enjoyable event if you've not gone, and look forward to seeing all of you in our...
Yeah, thank you, Mary, for hosting a great webinar.
And thank you to you both for being great panelists. I'd like to thank everyone who joined us for this webinar today. Again, if you have any questions, you can email them to the panelists. And if you are interested in our eDiscovery conference or the certification, go on our website, www.aceds.org. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.